Welcome everyone to Duke's Education Series on Liquor and Spirits. Today we will be discussing Chef Bill Raniger's favorite, whiskey.
Here at Duke's, we serve wild seafood, award-winning chowder, all-natural burgers, and of course, whiskey. Some of the whiskeys you will see in this video may not be carried at all of our Duke's, but still a great learning tool. Whiskey, or whiskey, refers to a broad category of alcoholic beverages that are distilled from fermented grain mash and aged in wooden casks. The whiskey making process. Whiskeys can be made from a variety of cereals depending on their types and water. These cereals are barley, corn, rye, and wheat. Malting. The process which converts barley to malt, referring to the malting process in the making of beer. Mashing, which produces wort, a sugar solution, from the ground or crushed malt. Fermentation, a process that produces wash, a weak, crude, impure spirit, consequent upon the introduction of yeast in the wort. Hey John, have you been there before?
You know what? I think this picture is right at Woodford Reserve. Sure looks like it.
I don't know. I wasn't invited.
Next year.
Distillation, the process that strengthens and purifies the spirit contained in the wash and also separates the solids contained in the spirituous liquor. Maturation, the process that transforms the raw spirit into whiskey. Bottling. After the period of maturation, the spirit is bottled to be then sold. The different types of whiskey or whiskeys are Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, American whiskey, Canadian whiskey, and Indian whiskey. First, we have Scotch whiskey, which must be distilled at a Scottish distillery from water and malted barley, to which only other whole grains may be added, and have been processed at that distillery into a mash and fermented only by the addition of yeast. It must be matured in Scotland in oak casks for not less than 3 years. It must not contain any added substance other than water and caramel color. Next, we have our single malt whiskey. It is a malt whiskey from one distillery, such as Glenfiddich, Glenmorangie, the Macallan, Balvenie, Glenlivet, Highland Park, Lagavulin, and Lefroy. Next, the blended Scotch whiskey. It is a mixture of malt and grain whiskey. Johnny Walker, Cutty Sark, Famous Grouse, and Chivas Regal. Irish whiskey. It is a whiskey made in Ireland. The grains used in the making of the Irish whiskey are barley, rye, and corn. Irish whiskey has to be distilled thrice and matured for at least 3 years. No peat fire is used to dry the malt. American whiskey. Kentucky. These whiskeys are called bourbon, made not less than 51% corn with malted barley. Rye is also used. Barrels are charred, toasted, and made of American oak. Examples are Wild Turkey, Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, and of course, our famous Duke's Woodford Reserve. From Tennessee, whiskeys are produced from a sour mash. Produces some of the world's richest and smoothest whiskeys, charred in oak casks and then filtered through a mass of charcoal. Jack Daniel's No. 7 would be a great example. Canadian whiskey. Made from blends of different grains, rye, corn, and malted barley, they have a reputation of being the lightest of all classic whiskeys. Famous brands would be Canadian Club and Crown Royal. The Crown Royal Cask 16, a personal favorite. Finally, we have Indian whiskey, made from various distilled spirits from predominantly molasses, but nowadays barley malt is also used. Some of the famous Indian whiskeys are Royal Challenge, Bagpiper, and Antiquity.
If you ever have one, please let us know.
The service of whiskey. Whiskey is served in the following ways: up, on the rocks, neat, with mixers. Whiskey is generally served in an old-fashioned glass, unless you work at Duke's and you give Bill it by the bottle. Thank you. This concludes our whiskey training.